The school board to order. Welcome all visitors who have taken time out of their busy day to come and join us tonight. Thank you for doing that. We have additions to the agenda tonight.
Mr. President and Board, we have three additions. One will be to consider another early senior release that has come up since we approved those in December. And then two items for for executive session. One is on negotiations and one is on student issue. That's in addition to the personnel one we already have.
That's it. Need a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda with noted additions. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda with the noted additions. Any discussion? All in favor, right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Approve the consent agenda. You were mailed or emailed, plus you have a couple of check registers at your place tonight. Take a minute if you need to and look them over.
The bus window. Yeah. You remember? $100.
We had, I can't remember what bus number it was, but we had a window that got broken out. It was broken out on the bus lot. I don't know if it was something from throwing a rock or somebody did something like that. But we find out that it's an old enough bus, they're difficult to replace.
One of the slides.
In the back, and they don't actually make that one anymore. We actually have to basically had somebody come and make it for us. And we got put. So,
Mr. President, I move we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor, right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Any patrons' comments tonight? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Moving on to business items. Class size projections.
Mr. President, if the board will indulge a rearrangement of the agenda, I noticed that Brenna Martin has just walked in. She's the representative from Student Council, and in light of the fact that she may have homework or other things, that she's the third item on the agenda, it might take a little bit to get there to entertain her doing the student council report first, so I wasn't sure if you're gonna get here, Brandon, so if the board will allow that, that would be great.
Thanks. This year in Student Council, we've been involved in many projects. Our two big projects this year have been the food drive and homecoming. Our amount of the food taken in by the food drive increased 800 pounds. This is the second highest it's been in the last 4 years. Homecoming is our other big project. We sponsored 2 homecoming dances this year. Our student council works in many different committees, from planning the assemblies to picking out the crowns. We have had several fundraisers this year to pay for the cost of homecoming, such as working 3 junior high concession stands. Right now we're getting ready to sell candy grams. At Christmas we sell candy canes that the students and teachers are able to send to each other, and our student council delivers them. We do this during Valentine's week with chocolate heart suckers. It's a way to let someone know that you care about them. Tomorrow we'll be having a student council meeting where we'll talk about how we can reduce our expenses. Homecoming is an expensive event. Costs include a DJ, crowns, and flowers. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have questions for Brendan?
What's it cost to put on homecoming?
Oh, for the year, it's about, $1,100 for both.
Combined.
Yeah. SAD helps us pay for one of the DJs, they split it with us, and that's the biggest expense, so we're gonna talk tomorrow and see what we can do.
Are they well attended?
It's decreased over the last couple of years, but I think a lot of that's because our enrollment has declined. So, but we're still paying the same amount for a DJ with less people coming.
That Stuco sponsored the DJ it maybe, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, back to elementary class size projections. Record it.
I'm gonna have Mr. Losey step up, and he's gonna help explain these numbers. Every fall, we look at class sizes to begin with, just to see how our enrollment's going, but also to look at how size of classes are running. And this month, we're looking at, again, at elementary, because we're seeing some patterns that we knew were going to start occurring, where we have decreasing numbers and reaching the point of looking at consideration of having fewer sections. We did that this year with first grade, because we knew in advance those sizes were going to be small enough. We could do that with one, with a little bit of extra help in the classroom. So, Mr. Losey, if you want to explain what you have here. Mr. Losey produced this, so
Okay,
I'll talk about it.
The first column there is where the enrollment figures for this year. That has changed. We've increased by 3 students there just today. As a matter of fact, they came in today. It's very difficult to, we look at this and do we want one section or do we need 2 sections? It's so difficult to know because we really don't know how many kids we're going to have. As an example, we thought we were going to have 18 first graders this year. And it got up to, we had 22. We have had one leave since, but that 18, of course, there was no question we were going to have one section. But when you get to 22 or 23 kids, especially in the younger grades, it's probably better to have 2 sections than one. So if you look then, it shows the number of classes, and then over the next column, next year's projection, we're way down kindergarten-wise next year. 13 students. And so we have 26 in sixth grade, 13 coming in. Well, we're going to be down quite a few students just right off the bat. Again, we don't know how many others might be leaving or how many we're going to have coming in. And these are just projections, mind you. Number of classes, of course, 13 kids would just have one kindergarten. 22 and 21 in first and second. You know, we're just right on the borderline. Do we try to stay with two? Do we have one section there? And then the other classes are 25 or above. We'll try to have two sections. And that fourth grade class this year with 32, that one has increased by two. We had one today and one come in last week. So that's up to 34, so there's no doubt. And then the next year, the 2010-2011 year, its enrollment will remain the same. We have 25 projected sixth graders leaving and 25 kindergartners coming in. So that one year, or that one class, I mean, that'll be coming in as kindergartners next year will kind of throw us off as we go through, just as our sophomore class did when they went through, because they were always around 18 kids, and we had just the one section. Looking on, I even looked at one more year, and of course kindergarten is just, we try to get information when people enroll so that we know. It looks like we'll be down quite a few students again in 2011, 2012, and this is K6 of course, because we'll be losing 32, 34 if they all stay that are here now, and we'll have 20 kids. We have 20 kids on our list now coming into kindergarten. So the projection is that enrollment is going to be decreasing, of course, as we look at it, but we have, the tough decision is going to be to decide, do we go with one section or do we go with two?
One of the things that, as we look at it, it was the same thing we looked at with first grade for this year is, when you see 21, that may seem like a really large class, and it is, for a single section. But the other side you have to look at is if you divide it into two classes, two sections, you have two classes of 10 and one of 11. And those are on the small side for what's, reasonable to do. So, what we did in this case was we kept it at one section, we provided some additional classroom aid assistance in that class. And that would be what we would probably do as we look to next year if those numbers were to hold. And we'll just have to kind of keep monitoring those as we go along in the year and see, just like Mr. Losey was talking about, we can have 2 or 3 kids move in and suddenly bump those numbers up if they're all in the same grade or across a couple of them. As you look at those numbers, are there questions that anybody has?
Your 10 and 11 year enrollment of 25 that are projected for kindergarten, you claim those, you're getting those numbers off of the information that students who enrolled this year, their parents filled out
Correct.
of their
Of
younger
the siblings,
children's?
right. And then we try to keep in touch with the health department, and so they let us know, Cheryl Foster lets us know of kids that we might not be aware of that she deals with, so.
Any other questions?
How's Lori Wyckoff been doing with her group?
She does really well. We have, Denise spends quite a bit of time in there. In the afternoons, Denise, Lori, and Natasha Decken, who is an aide, they do centers, and they divide them into 3 groups, and then they just rotate around, which works really nice. And that's something, like Dr. Kenworthy said, that we would be looking at if we go with one section is providing an aide in that room if, you know, it's around 21, 22 kids.
I got a question. Mr.
Yes, sir.
President. Okay, the first 2 or 3 years are the most critical to learning for
Mhm.
a child, getting off to a good start, reading, everything. Has there been any research done where maybe those smaller classes would be better and go to one teacher when they get to 3rd or 4th grade?
Yes,
And a larger,
yeah.
I mean, would our money be better spent to emphasize on that first year?
yes, yes. You know, and it's like I said, I think had we had 22 first graders that we knew were coming, we would have worked to have 2 classes there.
What I'm saying, maybe it would be better to
Yes,
go with 2 sections and put that aid up above, I
yes,
don't know.
yeah.
That-
Just
Oh.
wherever the larger class is, yes, I agree with
Because
that.
that's so crucial to get them off to a good start.
One of the reasons for, and that's a good question, one of the reasons that looking at it though is, what the research shows is that you start to have diminishing returns when the size gets down below about 14 or 15. Getting smaller than that doesn't seem to have really a positive effect on their learning, so. I mean, that's kind of the range that we normally try to look at for those elementary classes. But when we get down real small, and especially in light of what we may be facing in terms of budget, we may have to make hard decisions about how many sections we want to have and how we approach that, so. Any other questions? This is simply informational at this point. As we go along in the spring, as we get more information in terms of these numbers, as we get more information in terms of what may happen in terms of financing and budget, those 2 things kind of go hand in hand. We'll be coming back to the board with more information and more discussion about which direction we feel like we need to go. So.
Four-day school week.
I think it was I believe in October timeframe. Carol Long went to a meeting in Russell dealing with, primarily with conservation of energy and how schools can save money in the area of energy. Since that time, there have been discussions in a number of districts, some of them relatively close to us, looking at this. And I've sent out information to board members to kind of go through and so and study. Tonight, I would have a little bit of discussion about 4-day weeks. I have sort of a list I'm going to present and talk about some of the benefits and challenges of doing that. The background information to start with is most school districts go to a 4-day week solely to save money on things like utilities, heating and cooling their buildings, lights, on transportation, not running buses, or running buses 1 day less a week, and then also some savings in terms of some of the classified staff, where you're only serving 4 days a week instead of 5. You're only possibly needing to clean the building 4 days a week instead of 5. So savings that way. Those are some of the things that districts are looking at for that reason. What districts save depends primarily upon how aggressively they go after the building being closed for that 5th day. The more the building is left open or is used for other purposes that require, even if you set back the temperature, that require the building boilers to run or air conditioning to run, the less your savings are. I know, one board member shared with me that they had talked to someone from Weston that has a 4-day week, and that they really haven't seen the savings, but they also have had difficulty in basically keeping the building shut down on the 5th day. So that's one of the critical pieces. In most districts, though, that do this, the range of savings that they have is 2 to 4% of their budget. So for us, we would be looking in the range, probably somewhere between, depending on how aggressively we would do it, between $16,000 and $100,000 using those figures. And like I said, that's the best estimate based on what other districts have seen. So, I mean, it definitely, there are some reasons for looking at it from a cost standpoint. One of the things that I think is more critical to look at is what is the effect on the educational program. As long as the effect is level, if you don't see any detriment to the educational program, then obviously it makes sense to do that. If it's gonna cause difficulties for your program, if kids' test scores are gonna start to decline as a result of whatever, having a 3-day weekend all the time instead of 2, things like that, then you'd wanna look at it a little bit harder on whether you really want to have those cost savings, if they're worth it. And it also can be confusing to look at what different districts do and what attributes the benefits they gain. Because I've heard more than one person say, well, Ashland does this and they've got great test scores. I don't think you can attribute their test scores to having a 4-day week, at least not entirely. They also have a program out there where if a kid comes to school and doesn't have their homework done, they have mandatory study hall that night to get it done. That overrides everything. Doesn't matter what grade they are, what level they're in, whether they're a starter on the football team or anything like that. If they don't have their homework done, they stay after school from 4 to 5 to get everything done and caught up. That may have more of an impact on their learning and test scores than having a 4-day week. But one of the things that as you look at the research, and you probably have already discovered that in looking at some of the articles that you've read, is there's lots of information in there about how many dollars you can save on the things I mentioned, like utilities, transportation, and reduction of staff. There's not a lot of research on what it does to the educational program. There are some claims that people make, but in general, when you go to look at them, there isn't much data to back it up. So, anyway, as I mentioned, some of the benefits of going to this: savings on fuel, food, utilities, salaries of some workers. You can have longer blocks of time available. This is some teachers like this, some don't. This is essentially some of the same benefits you would gain if you had a block schedule by lengthening the day. It allows you to do all of your professional development during whatever the unscheduled day is, whether it's Monday or Friday or whatever it happens to be. And we try to avoid those, but we still end up having days where we have like early release on a Wednesday or a Monday off or something like that, and it will allow you to do that on that day off. Also, if you end up having to schedule some additional days due to snow days, if you don't have enough in your schedule, you can make those up on those 5th days as well. Some districts use the unscheduled day to do all of the things that normally disrupt the educational program. That might be another explanation for some of what Ashland and other schools see in terms of improvements. But once again, the more of that you do, putting those other things that take out of the educational program into the 5th day, the less savings you're going to see on your utilities and things like that. And as we go through there, please feel free to ask questions. And this is not just to the board, people that are in the community here too. Students that ride buses have fewer long commutes, because that fifth day, they don't have to ride the bus. And so, and we do try to keep our kids' bus rides to under an hour. But in some areas where this idea originally got started extensively, especially in eastern Colorado, where they had districts that were our size that might have 4 times the land area. And so they had some really long bus runs. So that was one of the benefits. Some of the research I came across had this one. I'm not exactly sure, why that would be, but they did mention this. Though, and I don't know what they defined absenteeism as either, whether that meant illness or whether it meant just not being there. Because one of the benefits you gain for teachers in terms of absenteeism is, they have a day where they can schedule appointments and things like that, doctor's appointments. But right now, they want a doctor's appointment, they have to take a day off from school to do that. So, fewer substitutes, kind of for the same reason I just mentioned, so you have a cost savings with that. And also, you don't have kids, you don't have as many times we have what I call latchkey kids, where they're coming home to an empty house because you have 2 parents that are working and things like that. The downside, it mentions on there, diminishing the need for after-school childcare, but it can increase the need for that 5th day to have childcare. And one of the other issues kind of related to this is, in order to lengthen the day to accomplish this, that means that all your after-school activities are starting later. And so kids will actually be getting home later if they're involved in after-school activities, and I think I have that mentioned in the challenges. Questions about any of the benefits, or anything that anybody sees or has heard of as a benefit to add to that list?
What do we do with the temperature of the rooms at 320? They all change.
They're all on setback, and so it's actually about 3/4, something like that, I think, when they go on setback. And those are things that we can do right now. One, there's a window that the temperature range is set at, and you can lower that window. I think we have the capability to lock out the controls, because right now the teachers can modify the temperature somewhat within that window. And they can even do an override if they come in to work on weekends or things like that. There's, on most of the thermostats, there's a button you can push, so override and it'll activate it. And so lock those out so that the temperature is always.
The evening temperature and the weekend temperature are the same, or
No.
they're different?
They're different. Weekend temperature is even lower. So, and those are things, for example, there's information for the board, and we'll be getting information out through building principals. We're looking at lowering that temperature range here in about a week, 2 weeks. We're going to try it and see how it works. Our climate control system is not state of the art, and so it's an old system. And it does work, but it doesn't have near the responsiveness and ability to go with changes and stuff like what some newer systems do. So
What do we do during ball games in the evening? Are we still on the lower temperature at that time?
the rooms are all on setback, but the facility is usually not. But it depends a little bit upon what the use is. For example, if it's a concert, we would generally keep the temperature elevated because there's not a lot of activity. If it's a basketball game where you're going to have a lot of people in there, there's going to be a lot of activity that's going to generate heat, then we usually keep the temperature so low for that.
So if we had activities on the 5th day,
What we do is we would set the schedule. It's all done on computer. That part is pretty up to date, it's just that the system it integrates with is an old system. We're able to set those schedules to be whatever we need them to be. So, and we can set them by zones or areas so that, you know, classrooms are on setback and the gym is still going, so.
While we're talking about this, I visited with Dr. Kenworthy a little bit. Another idea would be to not start until after Labor Day and lengthen your school day.
And I do have when we get further along, I'll show that proposal, but yeah, that is another one. And just to give you a quick, before we get to it, basically what it would be is kind of the same idea, but instead of taking a day out of the week, we shorten the calendar. So.
You were talking about the temperature setting the thermostats. What are they now, and what is your projections to set them at?
Right now, the range is 68 to 72 unoccupied, and we're looking at moving them back 2 degrees, so it would be 66 to 70. And then the weekend setback, we're gonna experiment with that a little bit because there's a point of diminishing returns if you set it back too far, when it comes on, yeah, you may expend more energy trying to catch up than you actually lost, so. So these are some of the benefits, some of the challenges of the 4-day week. We've already mentioned some of them. Collective bargaining, we do have the duty day is part of our negotiated agreement, so that would be, not that that's an obstacle, but it is something we would have to do. We'd have to go through and rework that part. Unpopularity with some of our salaried staff, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, because essentially we're going to be reducing their wages or opportunity for wages by about 20%. And this will come up when we look at that, described as an extended day but shorter calendar. It doesn't have this as much of a problem. So. Child care supervision of students on the unscheduled day. What some districts have done though is you've got a large population of your high school kids that aren't in school on that 5th day, and so they do babysitting and things like that. So there are solutions for it. But it is something that creates an extra headache for parents. Just the length of the day for the real young kids, depending on how much you extend it. And when I say real young kids, I mean like kindergarten through 3rd grade, for example. But when you talk to people in some of the districts that have done this, that doesn't seem to be they didn't experience that as being a problem. For all kids, just the extended focus time it requires for a longer day. Student safety during winter months, fewer daylight hours, and that's primarily for kids that are driving themselves, but we already pretty much have that now, so. 20% more instructional time lost when a student or teacher misses a day. Just the impact on extracurricular activities and schedules, that's where practices have to start later. Teacher preparation for the changing schedules. That's going to require some staff development to do that. Difficulties with students, especially those kids that already struggle with trying to stay focused in the amount of time that they're here. And then the second part of that is you're now going to a 3-day weekend every week instead of 2. I don't know that we can. I've not really seen too much research about what the retention thing does. There is some research out there about retention over the summer, and that will come up in a proposal we have later on. You can't just shut stuff off completely. You still have to run some stuff. Or you can get into some issues with mold and especially in the spring months where we have excess humidity and things like that. So perception of giving a day off, although the instructional time is exactly the same or greater depending on how it gets worked out, just the perception the public might have. Some of the things for a board looking at this to consider, and that's the part that I was talking about where there just isn't a lot of research out there. It's all just kind of anecdotal stuff. You can talk to people in districts and they'll tell you what their experience has been, but they can't many times directly correlate it to what they've done with their 4 days. There may be other things that are causing it, but just the educational soundness of doing that. Will our kids' education suffer from having the 4 day instead of 5? Do the benefits offset the disadvantages, and how will we know? This is kind of goes to the Ashland situation. They obviously have done some things out there that they've done the 4 day thing, but they've done some other things, and I don't know if they're directly tied to having the 4 day week, but by looking at these calendar changes, can we leverage that to help raise student achievement, not just keep it level? Can we use the savings that we get to not have to look at how many sections we have in elementary? Can we use it to help pay for additional tutors or after-school help and things like that? Do we have to make changes to the school finance formula? I don't believe so. As long as we're getting a number of hours in that we have to have, then we would get the full funding. They really don't look at how many days. You can go by days, but we choose to go by hours. So. Impact on federal funds. Probably would see, because we have federal funds that are tied to some of our programs like food service, we would see a reduction in our federal fund support for lunch, but that really is pretty much a wash anyway. You only get refunded for the meals you serve, so if you're serving fewer meals, then you would expect to have fewer refunds for those. Okay, and I already mentioned earlier, what things contractually would we have to look at differently to facilitate some sort of alternate schedule. The child care issue, this might be one of the biggest parts of it to be solved, is how much of an impact that has for parents. We already know that what we do when we have an early release day or a professional development day on a Friday or a Monday, that it does cause impact on parents. How large that is, I don't know. Because basically you're talking about having that same impact every week. As I mentioned earlier, how young kids respond to a long day. Do we have the programming in place to help special needs and at-risk kids deal with those extra days off? Not all that long ago, there was quite a bit of research being done and also just articles being written by people promoting the need for additional class time, additional educational time. And that was primarily based on some of the comparisons that were made. When people looked at some of what's called the TIMS study, which is the study of math and science across the whole world, And where we ranked, our kids ranked in terms of some of that research, one of the comparisons they made in there was how much time in the classroom did kids have. Going to a 4-day week would not change, it wouldn't lessen the amount of time we have in the class. It could increase it, I don't know. But it would appear to people, once again, this is just an appearance, a perception, that we're going the opposite way. For a lot of people, fewer contact days, they don't see it as contact time, but fewer contact days means less education. And it would take a community effort and commitment to do that, because it's gonna change a lot of different routines for folks. These are some of the things that, from the school operations side, that we definitely need to look at. We would want to go and visit some schools. I mean, if this were a direction we would go, or even if we don't, but want to go find out more about it, to see if it's something we want to consider, go and visit some of those schools, talk with them. We've already done some of the research and reading some of the case studies, but we need to go talk to some people in schools where they're actually doing it, see how they do it. Talk with the staff, because some of the staff have heard about this, some haven't. We haven't done a formal presentation to them, so finding out what concerns they see, pro and con. Basically get a sign-on from parents, community, staff, everybody that's going to be involved with it. And then design a schedule that meets the needs of most of those folks. For example, when I've had this discussion with Mr. Bergen, some schools don't meet on Mondays, some of them don't meet on Fridays, and there's different reasons for doing each of those. The reason for not meeting on Friday is because of all the activities we tend to have that kids miss out on Friday afternoons. The reason for not doing it on Monday is you can have some people make the same argument, well, we don't have all those activities, so we can close the building down and not have anything happen in the building. So it depends on whether you're looking at it from the kids in the classroom or you're looking at it from the utility standpoint. There's arguments both ways for that. It may be necessary to do some curriculum redesign, because you're going to take a curriculum that most people have used across a 5-day week, and now you're putting it into a 4-day week. And so they're going to have to do a lot of, and we hope they're doing that anyway, redesign their lessons. They're not just doing the same ones year after year, but it's significantly different in how you're going to approach and get through the same curriculum. Once it's in place, just monitoring it to see if it's having the effects we want, both for cost savings but also educationally. And then at some point, if you implement something like this, you make a decision. Is this doing what we want to do? Are we going to continue doing it, or do we need to abandon it? And this is something that some school districts have done, and this kind of goes to the concern of the issue about the at-need, at-risk, special need kids, is letting them have additional programming during that day off. But once again, the more of those kind of things you do, the less your savings is going to be in the building, because you're probably going to have to heat or cool part of it. Questions about any of that? That's a lot of stuff, I know. But I wanted to have that kind of as a jumping off point for discussion.
You said our time was based on hours?
Yes, we have.
52-minute class period counts as 52 minutes, or does that count as 1 hour?
The hours, it's actually, the way it works is the state says you have to have 1,116 hours. That's the minimum. And what you do is you take your start time, which is 8:15. You subtract out lunch, and then go with your end time. So
your
it works out
time
for us.
between classes counts as
Yes.
time?
The only thing that doesn't count between what I would call classes is the time when the kids leave lunch to go to your next hour class. You don't need to count that. You need to count the time going to lunch and not coming from lunch. So I think ours works out to be like 395 minutes, I believe, per day.
How long days would 4 days be?
That would be up for discussion. Just kind of a ballpark idea, what a number of districts have done, they'll add somewhere around 75 minutes to get enough time to be able to do the 4-day week. I'm going to show you a different scenario here, and it may be able to be done with less time than that, but that's just what kind of quite a few of them have done. Depends a lot too on what you have for a start time and end time. If you're going to start a little bit earlier, then obviously you can get out sooner and not have some of the downside of late practices starting and things like that.
If I remember right, the superintendent from North Barber, he said that they did fill in some Fridays, some fifth days. They got behind or something, or they knew they would be behind, and they went towards the end of the year, they did go 5 days.
Yeah.
And also, the teachers found that they covered more curriculum by the end of the year. They would get done with their curriculum before the end of the year because they had longer class periods and covered more material.
But being covered is one thing, and,
Their test scores went up.
okay, oh, that's what I was wondering. Just because you get through a book. That's right.
Kind of a variation on this same idea would be extend, and I sort of referred to a little bit ago, would be to extend the day, but then shorten the calendar. You still have a traditional 5-day week. For example, if you were to add roughly an hour to the day, and still have a 5-day week like we normally have, you could start the Tuesday after Labor Day and get in enough hours to meet, even considering a day or two of snow, you'd get enough hours and stuff in that you'd be out at least by the first week in May, possibly by the last week in April. That's if you add an hour and don't reduce the number of days in the week. Some of the I mean, there are some disadvantages to this, like there is for everything. One of the advantages is you don't have to worry so much about your building being shut down. Your cost saving on utilities comes from the fact that you're not starting up until after Labor Day, hopefully having less hot weather to have to deal with. And then in the spring, you're getting out, hopefully, before the hot weather really gets in gear, and you save on not having to air condition so much. It also doesn't have as much impact on the parents because they're not having to deal with the 5th day of trying to find daycare and things like that. The disadvantage is you're still going to have the same amount of teacher absenteeism for doctor's appointments and things like that. You don't have that benefit. The other thing that might seem a benefit for some of the hourly staff, if you're working under a 4-day week, trying to find a job where you can make up your 20% you lost for the 5th day is going to be hard to do 1 day a week. If you have basically full-time during the school year and then go out to find a different job where you're not employed by the school but somewhere else, then you don't have that implication like you would. One definite downside to the shorter calendar is you're talking about adding 5 weeks to the summer, which may be entertaining to some people to think about, but then we definitely get into issues about retention of learning. People that have concerns about, the 3-day, wrapping around 3 days you're gonna have it much bigger across 5 extra weeks off in the summer. Questions or comments from board, community?
Do we know,
Okay. Could I give you some, is that possible for me to
Sure.
idea for segment? I'm working at the lunchroom, as you know, and I'm not the boss, so I don't know how the money goes, but he mentioned how many you serve and then you get the money refund from that. But how many served and actually served is two different numbers. Because we check the tray, how many tray we used, that's the count number. But now all the kids get the free seconds if they want to. And if they don't get second, it's like a leap off. They really get upset. But, sorry, I'm nervous. But state or all those support comes for the just the first one. So second one, everybody get free, and they, some kids just get the main meal, which is like a pizza or meat stuff, which is really costly. And some kids, we can't remember this is a second or third or fourth. They coming back, you have to serve and let the kids go. So sometimes I catch them third or fourth kids. Or we have main line and side line. So sometimes kids go main line twice and go with the other side twice or 3 times. But there's nobody to check on that. So we basically giving out all the money, and then sometimes they know they just can't come back twice. So you ask your friend, and then one kid get 5 or 6 plates piling up on them. And then I don't think those kids, it's really needy person, but they just hungry. So I don't know, these things can probably get to the board subject couple times, and then we rather wanna feed the kids so they get full, but I don't know. They just pick what they want. It's not like every single thing. They just get the main meal, but no vegetable, nothing, no milk. So they just pick milk. Sometimes milk and main meal they have to have 3 things. So they take 3 things, and then, but they come back and get another one, and then rest of it in the trash. So every day we have like, one time when Dr. Summer was here, and we weighed it, it's like 30, 40 pounds of food trash. So, I don't know, you wanna feed them so they don't feel hungry, but that hungry, I think, of course I'm adult, I can eat, even though I don't like it. But kids just eat what they wants to. So, I don't know, that's the thing I think we can kind of cut down money. At least you can charge them like a 25 cents or 50 cents. I think Stafford and Knoxville charge for seconds. So I don't know, that's the idea I thought about bringing it up.
There is an item on our agenda later on this evening that we're gonna look at, and that is one of the things we're gonna talk about. It's something that the board has discussed, not recently, but several years ago, and has felt strongly about wanting to make sure our kids are fed and not going hungry. There's some things I think we can look at, and we'll talk about, that may be more cost effective and still not have them going hungry. So, any other comments? Sam, did you
yeah,
say
I was just wondering if, just looking at the cost thing here, which there's more to it than that, but to heat the building in January, does that cost less than cooling it in August or September?
depends upon the price of natural gas. That's the thing that
or, you know, just the total utility bill. You know, cause I was looking at, for where we live, I've kept track ever since we moved in and know what each month's average cost is. And, you know, at my house, it costs, the highest 2 months is January and February, and it's more than July, August, September, any of those. And so, thinking that, you know, you're gonna start later, you're gonna save money. I know at our house it wouldn't work, because it's like, just don't go to school in January. And cost-wise, you would save more money.
You would save some, but you can't shut the building down.
Right,
You
but-
can't have stuff freeze,
Right.
but,
But I was just wondering, you know, we're talking about cooling it, well, is that cost more than heating it?
yeah, like I said, it depends on the price of natural gas and what we have to pay for electricity in general.
Well, right, but you know, I've got 13 years of
Yeah, I mean, we can,
stuff on here.
we can pull those figures and see just from a raw number standpoint, which costs more.
So during the summer, do we just shut it off?
We dial it back, but we have never just shut it off, because like we have summer school running through the month of June. We have driver's ed in here during the month of June. But it's something we can do, we can just shut it down. And we have sports things that are going on in the summer. Parents and teams coming in, things like that. And once again, we can just shut it off. Tell people to bring a fan, a paper fan. So those are all decisions that we can make. But this discussion on the 4-day week, I mean, it's something I think that if we're wanting to do, one, I guess I would tell the board, we're on a pretty short schedule. If the board has any interest in trying to do this for next year, because our time frame is really crunched at this point in terms of being able to get out and do visits and have the discussions we need to have here and discussions with the community. Other surrounding schools that I know have done this. It's been a 5 or 6 month process just to get through all the discussions and things like that before they actually made a decision. And I feel like we really do need to have a discussion with somebody like Ashland, for example, that's been cited several times, and find out, you know, what are your hard and fast savings that you got? What did you do? You know, do you really attribute your test scores to a 4-day week, or what other things are operating? So,
I would just throw out for consideration, if this is something the board is serious about wanting to do, and look into this deeply and strongly consider it, I would like to see us, before we go to Ashland, before we go anywhere else, I would like to bring our staff in first, and our building principals, and have a discussion with them on their ideas and their views of it. Because if we have people in our building not happy, it ain't worth anything we say. And if we can't keep our people happy, then we're not doing our job.
Tara, have there been any discussions?
I haven't really talked to any classified staff. It's mostly been teachers and mostly high school. Probably a third of the high school staff seems to be pretty supportive of it. I've only really talked to one elementary teacher, because she's, LTA's been meeting lately, or LTA board's been meeting. She seemed to be pretty receptive to the idea, but I don't know you know, how much her opinion reflected the rest of the elementary staff. So,
Personally, I would like to know that.
Yeah, well, and yeah, that's one of the things we talked about, was that we meet with staff, parents, and community. In terms of, and then one of the key issues, I think, that we mentioned up here is, are we gonna do things differently in the classroom so that what I would call the real instructional time isn't shortened or diminished? Because, for example, if you, even on the 5-day extended day thing I was proposing, or talking about, where you add about an hour to the day and then start later and get out earlier, even on that proposal, you're only talking about adding 8 minutes to each class at the high school. So, is adding 8 minutes in a class gonna make a difference in terms of instruction? I don't know, I'm not saying yes or no. At the elementary, it's less of a problem because they're not structured around class periods. I mean, they do have blocks of time when they do things, but when you give them an extra hour of time, it actually is one whole chunk of time added on to the day, and they can do some things with it. At the high school level, you're basically cutting it up into pieces and giving it to each of the individual teachers, and it might be difficult for them to make an educational difference in their classroom with 8 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it happens to be. Because if not, if it just becomes additional time to have homework done or study hall or something like that, then you're actually taking away from your educational program. Well, if there's no other comments, we would go and present to staff, get their thoughts, their ideas about it, bring that information back to the board, and invite maybe a formal presentation to be made by the teachers. I mean, I invited a number of teachers to come tonight and speak if they wished, or just to come and watch. But if they wanted to make a formal presentation, that would be great too. That would be our next step then.
I would like to be assured that every staff member is given the opportunity to say yes or no, or whatever their opinion is. Write it down, and if they can't come.
well?
I would do it groups at a time.
I mean, I wasn't planning on doing, I mean, we meet like with grade school, meet with high school, meet with classified staff. At some point, you want to have some sort of a public meeting for the community to come in and voice concerns. I had one patron, a parent, who sent me an email. They were very supportive of the idea, but they're just one person. And I don't think this is going to be the kind of issue where you hand out ballots and take a vote with the community. I mean, we're going to have to make a decision based on what we think is in the best interest of kids educationally. And that may not necessarily be popular with everyone. And the more difficult part of this is it's going to be a balance between what's good for kids educationally, what's being good stewards of our financial resources. We've got to balance those things. It's not going to have an easy answer. So
I talked to someone from out of state about it, who is doing the 4-day, and what he told me is each school in each district is unique in itself. And if we would go to Ashland or wherever, well, we'll get an idea, but they don't have the same situations that we do. Their biggest one, this particular person, they were from Wyoming, and their biggest problem was travel time. He said, I'll give you just an idea, to get to a store somewhere, he said, to a Walmart or a Dillon's was an hour-and-a-half drive from the city that the school was in. He said, in their case, that rural, it's worked out very favorably.
Well, the whole 4-day school thing started in the readings we had in Mexico, based on that premise, transportation.
And if you read this, there are some that say it's working and some that don't like the idea that they've already done it. So it's just gonna take a lot of time and discussion, I think.
Well, the community and the students in the North Barber district, they said they wouldn't want to go back to a 5-day after having a 4-day.
I've heard several throughout the last 10 years or so of districts that I've heard of that say the same thing. It's kind of hard to convince people at the beginning, but once they've gone through it and, you know, gotten the kinks worked out, that they don't want to go back.
And having a student in junior high and their activities are on Thursday night, and they get home late, I mean, we're gonna start traveling farther and farther away, and they get home late and have to get up and go to school on Friday. Could help out a little bit for some junior high students anyway.
Board member at Weston, I got information from, said the community there had really bought into it. They've been doing it for several years. He said their biggest problem was with their school building. Getting it, he said, we're not doing a good enough job keeping it shut down.
Cost savings.
There's too many people in there on the weekends, and the heat and lights are all on. So we need to do a better job there. He said, we're saving the other way, but we're not saving that or building enough yet. That was his opinion.
I think it'd be so easy to schedule everything on that extra day, on the 5th day, and just fill the building up again. You really have to be disciplined to make sure that doesn't happen.
I almost think that it'd be better for us to, you know, we're a school that does have a lot of activities, we have a lot of sports activities, to look at starting school, like you mentioned, around Labor Day, and then ending in the first part of May. You know, just a few minutes on the end of each day or beginning of each day, and it'd fit into people's schedules better. The idea that kids will retain things, bothers me about a 4-day school. I just think that we tend to have a lot of students, and I'd like to know from these other schools what their percent of students, special needs students are.
That was one of the problems listed in the North Barber presentation.
I really think that the high level of students we have at that level, we would see a increase in that. So I think that just lengthen the school day a little bit, just for that. It would hit two things, transportation and utilities.
The other thing would be with special ed co-op. I'm not sure how many people are moving school to school, we have 1 or 2.
That we have,
Well, that, from the co-op that come and go.
there's at least 2,
2.
maybe 3. Yeah, that's a whole different issue, because, I'm not sure how that could fall into, for example, their negotiated agreement in terms of start days, end days, start times, end times, things like that. So, yeah.
All something to think about.
Yeah. Anything else on that one?
How do we want to proceed from here? What are we going to do?
Well, I'll coordinate with the building principals in terms of meeting with all the staff. And probably visit with them to talk about what they think might be the easiest or best way as far as the community part of it goes. The staff actually would be relatively easy, but doing something for the community might be, not to think about that one before. I mean, it's probably going to be multiple events to allow people to have time to come in. Part of it will be too, just getting information out to parents to know what the discussion is going to be about. So, I'll coordinate with them, and we'll set up some times for that.
I am hearing we want to pursue this. Start, okay? All right, everybody's along that page? Okay? Thank you. Moving on, finance? Calendar update, excuse me.
Have provided starting point calendars to the people that are on the calendar committee, and hoping we'll be able to schedule a date this week or next week to start to look at initial proposals. Basically, we took that one that I presented to the board last meeting. It's been, I don't know how widely it's been distributed, but I know that people have looked at it and provided various thoughts or inputs on it. So the committee will get together and start to pull all those together for some proposals for the board to look at in March. That's all I have.
Whether we wanna hear it or not, a finance report.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep the staff updated, because obviously the finance part, is a critical part of our district operation outside, after educating the kids. And, lack of information or misinformation can cause people to be anxious. Unfortunately, with the kind of information you get out of the legislature, that in itself can make people anxious. Last week, for example, was quite a roller coaster ride with the Senate on Wednesday talking about taking back $117.50 per full-time equivalent kid. That was on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, they turned around and passed a bill that actually only took away $33 per kid, which was, that was a welcome relief. That, for us, and that's in this current fiscal year, that works out to about $25,666. Unfortunately, historically, the Senate is always the easiest to work with in terms of school finance bills. The House has always been more problematic. And I had people coming up and slapping me on the back on the weekend saying, gosh, isn't it great, so I'm gonna have to cut, 25,000. Gosh, it's great to hear. I said, I'm waiting to hear what the House does. And they came out of the gate today, and the first proposal that they had come out was about $88 per kid to take back. And there's all kinds of various changes they're talking about. One, in conjunction to that, they're talking about decoupling the local option budget from the general fund. Basically, right now, your local option budget is tied to your general fund as a percentage. What they talked about in one of the pieces of legislation before the House is that they would cut that connection so that schools, if your general fund went down, you wouldn't have to have your local option budget follow it. You could choose to keep your local option budget as high as you wanted, up to what the state percentage is. And that's based upon, this would make Dale Dennis and the folks in the school finance area crazy, I think, because what the bill proposed was that you would take your full-time equivalent student count, multiply it by $4,433, and then do your percentage. Because every time these different bills get passed, they're talking about taking away some dollar amount off of that $44.33. The governor's proposal talked about taking $22 off. What the Senate passed was taking $33 off. The House is proposing $88. What this proposal would do would say, yeah, we're gonna take those funds back, but your local option budget is always gonna be tied to $44.33. I don't know if that will go anywhere or not. For districts that are, the ones that it primarily impacts are those that are already at 30%. Those that aren't, it really isn't an issue. So we're kind of watching that one. Another proposal that's in the House, I just would make everyone nervous, I'm afraid, and I don't really see this going very far, but who knows. Right now, we have to provide teachers notice by May 1st if they're going to be non-renewed. And then they have until May 15th to tell us that they are or aren't going to come back. This particular bill would tie those dates to whenever the legislature passed their budget bill. So this primarily impacts teachers that are in their first couple of years of teaching, don't have tenure, but a district could end up kind of hanging them along, and if the legislature didn't do anything with their finance bill until late June, first part of July, that those teachers that, if they're in the first couple of years of teaching, and this doesn't impact us except for a couple staff, but they could basically walk up to them, say the legislature passed their bill the last day of June, they could go up to that teacher on July 15th and say, sorry, we're not gonna have you back. And at that point, you know, we're halfway through the summer and that person's going, but I thought, you know, had a job. And plus also for districts, the impact is some of those people, if they think they're on the bubble or at risk, they may just cut their losses and take off and go looking because they don't want to be someplace if there's that possibility. So there's some really different things that are out there, but I'm hoping for something in the neighborhood of what the Senate passed, but we'll see what the House does. And the downside to some of this is that we're still talking about this current fiscal year. They haven't even had any discussion yet about next year, and likely probably won't until late March or April, because they're not going to want to do too much with budget until they get the next more accurate fiscal revenue projection from the committee that does that. So that's kind of where we're at. One of the things I did want to show you, and this is just kind of like estimates, and these are not in any hard and fast order, okay? There is sort of an order to them, but it's not a lock-in thing. It's something for the board to get to see, to know what we might be dealing with. The $88 per student that the House initially came out with today, that works out to about between $65,000 and $66,000 for us. So these are some examples of either cost savings or staff reductions or things like that that we would have to do to hit those various dollar amounts. Now this one was based, all those numbers are based upon January 16th implementation. If we had started on January 16th, that would be the number we would have. We're now February 2nd. So all those numbers, I mean, we just had to pick a date, and we had to say, what would it be from that point forward? And so every day that the legislature doesn't do something, those numbers get smaller and smaller, and the depth, how far down the list you have to go, gets further and further. And some of those things that are on there are just, I'll be honest with you, they're wild guesses because we haven't done it yet. Like the amount that we would save from temperature setback, that's my best guess. Primarily based upon what other districts have seen, but you know, we may not be comparing systems or even similar. An item that Mrs. Norton was talking about, you'll see on there, lunchroom second entree. We do know what that dollar amount is because when we do our food service audits, the person from the state that comes out and does the audit, they tell us, they know exactly what it costs us for that. It cost us $31,000 last year to offer second entrees. Their suggestion was that we not offer second entrees, but do offer seconds on fruit, vegetables, rolls, things like that that are provide good nutrition for kids that don't have the cost that the second entree does. And the rest of those are just
So
some of
the
our
second
positions.
entree would be available at all, or they just have to pay for it if they wanted it?
Or you could have a pay for the second entree thing, yeah. We could have it be where it's available if they have to pay for it, but not doing away with seconds, what that proposal is, does not do away with seconds, does away with second entree. So they would be, if they would come back on vegetables or fruit or things like that, meals, that we would have those. But it's the entree that's the most expensive part, and that's sort of what, as I said, Mrs. Norton was referring to. Anyway, that gives you some idea of what we're looking at. Now, one of the other reasons for showing you those is because the thing I just got done talking about was they haven't started talking about budget for next year. The legislation that's being passed right now is to hit a revenue shortfall that right now is a little bit over 200 million, but some are saying it's gonna grow to as much as 300 million by the end of the fiscal year, by June 30. Just using that as a ballpark idea, they are forecasting that our revenue shortfall for next fiscal year is $1 billion. So whatever they're talking about right now for budget reductions and what we have left, we need to take times 3 just to get some handle on it. So, for example, it creates quite a range because if you go with the Senate bill, if their bill supposedly hits that target somehow of 300 million, they're only saying we have to cut 25,000. And multiply that times 3, 75,000. That, you don't have to go very far on this list when you look at it for the whole year, because you have to keep in mind this is only for about 4 months, 5 months. When you look at it for the whole year, you don't have to go very far on the list to get to that. But if it's on the other end, what the House is talking about, which is 66,000 times 3, 180,000, for the whole year, this list only gets to about 100,000. I'm sorry, no, for the whole year, this list gets about 140,000, I'm sorry. So, we come up short. So, that's why some of these discussions, I want you to see some of the stuff early, to know what some of it might look like. As soon as the legislature finishes what it is they're gonna do, we will probably call a special meeting to have these discussions about what we have to do, and where the board would like to make those reductions. So, there are a couple of groups on there that I'll be visiting with this week, just so that they know what's possible. And I think some of them, with some of the other information that we've been sending out, some of them have already probably started to read the handwriting and know that that's a possibility. But I want to make sure that they've been informed. Any questions about what's on the screen?
Are shared services with Stafford District still, I know you have communication with those heads every month, you try to?
Yeah, and when we're talking about that, that's something that, I think it's probably, I mean, this is kind of, an unusual situation to be in, but it may be time to start visiting with their board again, for example, at Stafford. And it may be that this becomes the force to look at that seriously. I mean, yeah, this is a bad situation, but what if this situation persists for 2 or 3 years? It may be that we need to do some serious combination of things to get along. And despite all of the emotions and politics and things like that, it may be time before there's a quote that the best time to solve a problem is when you can see it before it gets too big. We can see this one right now, and it may not take too much longer before it gets too big. It may be time to get into some serious discussion about combining a lot of programs. So I'll be visiting with Dr. Chapman about that. So one final piece of information, somewhat related to this. The U.S. House of Representatives have passed legislation that would provide some, what they're calling stimulus, a stimulus package for education. There's not a lot of information out there about it. I can tell you roughly what the dollar amounts would be. It could be difficult, this is gonna sound strange, but it could be difficult to use some of the funds to benefit our education program. I mean, to the point of not having to reduce staff. The dollar amount, in the projection that I've seen, would provide our district with, if this is still accurate, $114,500 in federal stimulus and that's for '09, for the existing school year. The difficult part of that is it's tied to 3 programs. It's tied to Title I, which is part of our reading program. A category that's just titled construction. And best I can figure out is, because like I said, there's not been a lot of explanation about it, is if that would be any kind of building projects that you have. And I'm supposing it could be something like capital outlay. Almost half of it is in that category, which doesn't really help us keep people. And then finally, $41,000 for special ed. The $41,000 for special ed, that one helps us. Oh, I mean, the Title I helps us too, but the $41,000 for special ed helps us significantly because that offsets money that we actually have to directly take out of our general fund to support our special ed program. So that'd be a significant help. I don't know how this is going to come. The one report I read on this said they're trying to earmark it. That's a bad term. That's not the right term. They're trying to structure it so it doesn't have to be distributed by the state. They want it to go as much as possible directly to the school districts. They don't want it to come to the state as what's called a block grant, where the state gets this large chunk of money and then they end up distributing it out because their fear is, they've seen before I guess, that it doesn't get to the places they want it to get to. And so they're trying to set it up so that it goes directly to the school districts. So this has only made it through the House, and I have no information about where it's at the Senate. So
Are there strings attached?
always.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
because it's not state, it's federal,
Yeah.
there's just gonna be more rules?
Well, I don't know if there's any additional. We already have rules for all these things.
Yeah.
So it's probably just the same existing rules. The only one in the group, I mean, we already have Title I and special ed stuff, so we know those rules. The construction part, I don't know. So, we would look at how, if there was some way to finagle the use of, maybe there won't be quite as many restrictions on the use of that as there are with capital outlay, that somehow we might be able to use it to offset some personnel cost, I don't know. But,
For brick and mortar probably, and not wind generators and such.
well, not necessarily, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe it would cover the cost, something like that would then offset something, so.
Or could you put off and rebid the track and if that could be used, and then you would have to take that money out of it?
Yeah, or we have an auditorium roof that we're looking at needing to make repairs on, so some things like that. But this is still a ways from getting to us, but we'll keep you posted. Any questions from the board or anyone attending?
Moving on,
Okay,
we added agenda items.
actually, we have one more.
One more financial report.
Yeah, on your computer desktop, you'll see a file called expense report. That's the monthly report we give you that shows you the status of each of the various lines. We're basically going along on target with each of these areas. I would point out down there on utilities and electricity, again, you'll see what looks like an error message in the spreadsheet. That's because we used to pay all of our utilities out of general fund, but because of additional costs for special ed, personnel and things like that, we now have to pay for some of our utilities out of local option budget. So that creates that error message there, just so you understand what that is. And I don't see any others that really. Need any discussion or explanation, but it'd be fine to cover any of them if you have them.
Ready. Added agenda items.
Mr. Bergen, you have a senior early release approval?
Word release, yeah, right, we just, and it wasn't available at the time in December, it hadn't all come about, so that person's talked to me about doing that in January, starting when we came back from Christmas break, so.
Okay, and they've met all the
Yes,
requirements?
yeah, everything's on schedule, there's no problem, so
Okay.
I was willing to work with the person so they could do that, you know.
Okay, so if we can have a motion from the board to approve.
Kendra Stanford.
Yeah.
I would move to approve the early senior release for Steve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the senior early release. Any discussion? All in favor, right hand. All opposed, same sign, motion carried. Board member activities. Board member one out. Any activities? Nothing? Administrative reports?
At the top, as usual, is the enrollment. And if you want to compare the one that we had up earlier, this one is the updated one with the other students added to it. Just some things that happened through the elementary. We had our jump rope and hoops for heart last week, and the elementary students raised a little bit over $8,700 for the American Heart Association, which I thought was just amazing, just amazing. It really is a testament to what our community does and with giving us that much money. We're still going with our after-school tutoring. We've been doing this most of the year. Mrs. Russell does the fourth graders mainly in math, and Mrs. Roush does after-school tutoring for fifth and sixth graders in areas that they need, if they have homework they need to make up or help with something. Our Stafford County Spelling Bee is tomorrow morning. It starts at 9 o'clock in the auditorium. We'll have 45 students competing. Parent-teacher conferences on February 12th, and just as a reminder, the spring conference is the one where it's usually by, what would you say, invitation only, if that makes sense. Sixth grade music festival, of course, that includes 7th and 8th graders, is on February 20th. And then I just put down Kansas assessments. We are, as usual at this time of year, working really hard to get everyone prepared for the assessments. So. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
On enrollment, you can see it's been pretty consistent all year, so we're hovering around that same mark, 1 or 2 student difference. We had CPL Scholars Bowl this afternoon. I wasn't able to, I don't think it was overtime, or just didn't get around to getting the results, weren't available at press time, so to speak. Honors program, KU Honors program, February 12th. We're taking those 4 students to Larned. We'll have 6 students inducted in a National Honor Society on Sunday. Y'all will get invitations if you haven't got done so already. You'll be getting those. Welcome. February 23rd is the Pratt Academic Olympics again. And right now at this time, Mrs. Haynes was working on it again today. We have approximately, it's around 60, give or take. We'll see what it comes to. The information needs to be in by next Monday, so that's kind of where we're looking at right now. Might have 60 kids attending that. Regional Scholars Bowl, we go to the one hosted by Stafford on Thursday. High school girls basketball team won the tournament in the first and last week, as you're all aware. On February 20th. And the Sportsmanship Award, there you go, yeah. All right. On February 20th, we host grades 6 through 8 music festival. Junior high boys and girls basketball teams are currently in the tournament. They both won Saturday. They both play Maxville, I believe, on Thursday. And then the finals are Saturday for the 3rd place game. Activity account, I believe, is at your place. Thank you.
Just a couple things. Wanted to thank Mrs. Friesen. She's here tonight. She's very instrumental in the Hoops for Heart program. I think the kids get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's a lot of fun for them. She has a good kickoff there. I think they had the, what do they call it?
Hot peppers.
Hot peppers.
Water.
From Warren. And kind of gets the kids wound up about it. So and last year, I think we had the 2nd highest
In the state of
in the
Kansas.
state of Kansas. So, and so we're competing with some pretty big schools out there that also do this. So that's really speaks well both for our kids and our community and how we support that, but also for how Mrs. Friesen helps out with that and promotes it so much. So it's also great to see our girls do so well in the first tournament. This afternoon at 5, Mr. Bergen, one of the local, or one of the area.
Brian Holmgren.
Yeah, from
one of the reporters from Channel 12.
Yeah, in Wichita came up and interviewed, I don't know, Mr. Wilson, you were probably there, what was that like?
He interviewed 3 of the players and then Coach Smith. You know, one thing about this group of kids that we have, to the community and to the coaching staff, it was a big deal winning the tournament. To them, it was just, they knew they were going to do it, they just went and did it. And then they were back in practice today working just as hard or harder than they have all year. But Carol mentioned the Sportsmanship Award, and that to me is a really important thing. Our fans and the kids that were there Saturday night did a great job. And of course we always want our players, you know, to demonstrate good sportsmanship, and they do. They're good kids.
I think like, we just had a real good following, both our fans and our kids. Friday, boys basketball team, they'd raised some money earlier in the year, I think in a concession stand, so they used some of their money to make the trip down there Friday, and it worked out pretty nice for them. It was kind of a nice team building thing, so they used their money to pay for gas to get down there and for meals for themselves. It's fun for them, I think, to be down there together as well. But I think the amazing thing for people like TV station, folks like that, is they hear about this 1A school that's out there taking on 4A, 5A, 6A schools and standing up to them and whooping them. And, not that we're about whooping people, but it's about hard work and dedication and the commitment it takes to be a good player. What is so fun to see is, we have what I would call a pretty deep bench. Danny does a nice job of working the kids in and out, and they all get to see court time, and he doesn't rely on just 4 or 5. And I think that's part of our advantage is other schools, they have 5 or 6 kids and they're on the floor all the time, and we just literally wear them down. So it's just a lot of fun to watch, so. looking forward
And
to
one thing I told the kids tonight at practice is we have really smart kids,
Yeah.
because they knew Beth was hot and they just kept getting her the ball. And that was fun to watch.
Yeah, I never did hear the final results, but I'm guessing that there were a number of tournament records that were broken, because I think the free throw record was 9 in a single game, and Beth Shirley had that.
She's in there with Lori Kane and 2
Yeah.
others.
Coach Smith read those off to them
Did he?
at practice tonight, and some of the individuals and then team things were either first or second and third in one area.
That's
So,
fun.
yeah.
Neat. Okay. All right, that's all I had.
Anything under miscellaneous? Moving on to executive session then? Which time do you feel?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Got people. Yeah, under miscellaneous, something I failed to mention is, we sort of missed it, and I apologize for that in January. January was board recognition month, and so, we missed it by just a couple of days by doing it tonight, so. Wanted to recognize the board just for all the effort that you put in, the time, endless hours that we spent here around this table. And we have some refreshments tonight as part of that recognition, and people in the audience, feel free to join us as well. We'll take 10 minutes before we actually get around to an executive session, if you want to grab some cake. Do you have any?
It's melted, it has to be good.
Okay. And ice cream. So, help yourself to that. So, but in terms of executive session,
Do you want that now or after?
well, let's do the refreshments and then, yeah, we can actually set the motion after we get done with that, so.
Okay.
So,
Step up and get something and then we can get back to business.
Hey.
Stay and eat with us?
Not over.
When they-
You have a piece of cake?
I just wasn't-